So welcome back to our Puredata tutorial. So today we move away from our Macintosh computer and move to something physical. So in previous time we have tried to use, for example, your keyboard and also the mouse as a way to perform interaction. And as a matter of fact, if you would like to use something more physical, for example, something like a switch or sensor, so it's necessary for us to integrate that part into our software platform. So today we'll do something very straightforward and simple in the sense that we are going to break apart this computer keyboard and try to reassemble it into a controller to work on with our Puredata patch. So this is a common USB keyboard you can find in the computer store, and we're going to use it to break it apart because it's quite cheap compared with those expensive Macintosh keyboard by using those Bluetooth or other technologies. So the tools we are going to use is one screwdriver over here and also one cutter. And this is all the necessary tools we are going to break apart this computer keyboard. So first of all, before you break it apart, you might have to test it with the computer because this is a USB keyboard. So this is the USB plug. You need to plug in to your computer to verify this one is actually working before you start to break it apart. So once you do the testing, you can turn it upside down. And in a lot of those cheap USB keyboard, most of them are assembled by using screws. So this is quite easy to disassemble them by using a screwdriver. So we'll unscrew all the screws one by one and then try to have a look at what's inside the keyboard. Okay, so we are ready to open up the keyboard. So inside most of the keyboard, you can find some sort of those transparent film, and actually they are the button. So actually each one of the buttons come with this kind of transparent knot, and once you press the button and the film or with the connection will connect together with form a connection as is a form of switch. So we can remove this one by removing the final two screws over here. So we have this form of screw need to remove in order to take away the controller board. First of all, we can remove those transparent sheets of plastic, which actually the composition of all the key and layout in this board. And then the next one, we can remove carefully this particular controller board. So every keyboard, so this is the heart of your keyboard, or actually you can call it the brain of your keyboard, come with this controller board connected to the USB cable. So what we are going to do next is try to reconfigure this board into something useful. So for this one, you can keep it for souvenir or keep it for something you would like to make use of. So otherwise, in our case, we do not use this one anymore. After we taken out the controller board from the keyboard, you will have this one. So this is the USB cable which is connected to this particular controller board. So this is a very simple controller board. So you can find from the bottom of this one. So this is the top, I would say, and this is the bottom. And along the bottom, you can find some sort of teeth or tooth-like material, which is actually the connector, which connected to the plastic sheet, which form some sort of conduction or connection with the keyboard. And what we are going to do with this one is we have to, for example, connect one single wire in one of those tooth to another one. And you can consider this one, some of those teeth will be in the left hand side and the other one will be on the right hand side. And you can consider it's some form of matrix. So the left hand side can be the row and the right hand side can be the column. For each of the row connected to a column, that's the intersection point will be one individual key in your keyboard. So what we are going to do is try to connect a number of those wires from the left hand side to the right hand side, and such that by connecting the wire you can pretend to have an individual key sending out from the keyboard controller through the USB cable to your computer. So this is the mechanism we are going to do. And in order to connect a wire to this metal connection point, we need to remove some of those coating, and by using this simple cutter. And the process is quite simple and straightforward. You just need to scratch out the coating one by one. And then the next step is you will use the soldering gun in order to solder a piece of very thin wire along each of those connection points. So to scratch the metal plate, you use a cutter and carefully scratch out the coating. Without damaging the actual circuit. And all you need to do is to expose some of the metal part such that you can easily use the soldering iron in order to solder it. So if you do not scratch, it's quite difficult for you to attach the soldering material. And one by one, you would like to scratch out the connection point. And you can do a few of them in the left hand side and a few of them on the right hand side to make sure there will be enough point for you to connect. And depending on your artwork or your exercise, so you have to decide how many keys you would like to use. For example, if you are doing a VJ program, so each one of the key combination will be, for example, a visual effect. And in that case, you have to decide, for example, how many key or how many visual effects you would like to have before you do the soldering of the wire. And because the more key you would like to have, the more connection point you have to scratch out for the soldering connection. So if you have time, you can scratch every one single piece of those connection points, and to make sure you have enough for your connection. So you can see some of those metal parts. The shiny one is the one I've scratched out the coating, and those are the points that are ready for doing the soldering process. So the next step is we're going to solder some of the wire in one of those connection points and then try to connect 2 points together and to see or verify if there are any key can be generated in your computer. So after we've taken out the controller in the USB keyboard, and after we also scratch out the material we used to coat the connection point. So in this case, we have seen those area. We have used the cutter to scratch out some of the coating material. So the next step is we are going to connect the wire to connect those connection points. And we'll use the soldering method in order to connect the wire. So first of all, you select some sort of very thin wire. So I use this kind of wrapping wire in order to do the connection. And for the equipment, I have this funny thing we call the third hand. So what we're going to do is to use the clip to fix the position of this controller board such that we do not need to use our own hand to hold the board for the soldering process. So we have the soldering gun over here, and we also have some of those cleaning material. We can use it to clean the tip of our soldering gun. And for the soldering process, we have this wire we call the soldering wire. So it's kind of metal where you can melt it with a relatively low temperature, but low temperature is not actually very low in the sense it can burn your finger if you touch the tip of the soldering gun. So we'll use it to do the soldering. So the process of the connection is, first of all, we'll use the soldering gun to attach some of the solder on top of the metal connection point over here. So for the demonstration, I'll just connect 2 wires, one in the left mode point and one in the right mode point of the controller board. So this is the process we are going to do. And then the next step is we actually do the soldering. So after we scratch out all those covering material in the connection point, so the next step we're going to do is to attach the soldering iron on top of those connection points. Okay, so I managed to attach a little bit of those soldering iron on top of those metal points. Okay, so this one is a little bit easier. So I managed to put a little bit of the soldering iron. And the next step will be we try to connect 2 pieces of wire onto the point we have applied the soldering iron. So I cut out 2 pieces of wire from this we call the wrapping wire. So for this kind of wire, it comes with some sort of insulator or coating in the outer area of the wire. You need to remove the coating, so that's the plastic part, by using some tools like this one. So for the area we used to connect to the USB controller, we remove only a little bit of the covering material. And for the other end, we would like to use it manually to connect them together. We can expose a little bit more of the metal part. So for the second wire, we do the same things. Removing the plastic covering of the wire. So this type of tool come with different sizes of holes along here, so you can determine which one of the holes would best fit with your size of your wire. So actually you can also find the numbering system over here, which should match to the numbering system on this particular clip. So once we have the wire ready, we can try to connect them to the controller board by using the same technique. We melt a little bit of the soldering material, the soldering iron, and then push this one onto the area and then wait until it cools down to attach. So for this one is connected, and then I do the second one. So the second one is also connected. You can take out to examine a little bit whether the connection is good or not. And the next step is we plug in the USB over here back to your computer, and then use any of your typing program, for example the Microsoft Word or TextEdit or Notepad or WordPad, and to use the two connections over here to touch upon each other. And in this case, it simulates one key press on your computer, and you should see some of the key appear in your typing program like the Microsoft Word. Or alternatively, you can have this one with the exploding metal part to touch upon each of the connection point over there where you have scratched out the covering material. You can also generate some of the key, and depending on how many keys you would like to have, you can design how many of those wires you would like to soldering or attach on top of those metal connection parts. And the next step is we'll try to plug it back to our computer and then use the two ends of this metal part to simulate a key press on a keyboard. So we have two wires connected to this USB controller board, and the next step what we are going to do is to use the USB connection over here and connect it to a Macintosh computer. So actually it doesn't matter whether you use a Macintosh computer or a Windows computer, so as long as they support your own USB keyboard, so this will do. So once you have connected to the computer, and you can open up, for example, in my computer I use a TextEdit, and then use it as a keyboard to type in the text in the TextEdit programs. So the next step is you just need to, for example, the wires you have just connected to contact them together. So once you make the contact, and you can keep an eye on your program, like in the TextEdit, they will generate some forms of character. In this one is something like a cooked or back-cooked character on the screen. And as I mentioned, you can also try out different combination of the key. For example, if you just hold one of these piece of wire and then try to touch upon other area you have scratched out the covering material, you can generate, for example, other key on the screen. For example, I can generate the EZ over there, and I can also use the other one, the opposite one, to touch on the other side, like the 6, 5, or other more character. Sometimes you may accidentally try to create some of the key that will shut down your computer, or change some of the other configuration like the volume or the brightness. And because those character or those control are actually some form of ASCII character, you can also generate it from the keyboard. So it doesn't matter. So as long as, for example, in your application you select those more common or visible character like the number, in our case the 6, the 5, or other you would like to use the code character, and those characters are common visible character, you can capture it from Puredata by using the gem keyboard command. Okay, so in the last exercise we used the 2 metal wire in order to generate a key from the USB keyboard controller, which is connected to our computer, and test the program to simulate a key press. And then we'll move back to the Puredata with the use of gem and gem keyboard. So first of all, if you take a look of the gem keyboard command, it will automatically convert the key where you press in your keyboard into a key code as represented by a number. So we can create the gem window and then start the rendering. So once you start the rendering, the keyboard is ready to receive the key from either real or modify the keyboard. So remember, you need to click upon the gem window in order to make the gem keyboard to work properly. So the next step is you move back to your physical device. This is the USB controller, and then use your hand or whichever means to connect the 2 pieces of wire together, and at the same time take a look of what's happening in the gem keyboard and also the patch over there. So once you press or connect them, you'll see the number 50 which appear in the number box, which is the key code representative of those code character we have seen in text edit. And you can further experiment by, for example, touching one piece of the wire to other metal connection point, which will give you other number that is the internal representation of the particular key in the keyboard. And similarly, you can touch the other wire onto other connection point to have a look of the result. And this is the first part. We use our hand to touch the 2 pieces of metal together. So in real life application, usually you connect these 2 pieces of wire into something more meaningful, in a sense that can be embedded into your creative work. For example, you can put it in some forms of metal part, which, for example, put it on the door, and once you close the door, you can have the 2 pieces of metal connect together to function as a switch. And of course, you can use a physical switch like this one. So this is a button-like switch. You can press upon the button to create a connection between the 2 pieces of metal over here. So we can have a look of the experiment. So first we connect one piece of wire to one end, and then we connect the second piece of wire to the other end. So once the 2 pieces are connected, you can try out the pressing of the button. So once you press the button, you can try to have a look at the response from the gem. So it will give you the number 50. So this is the effect of pressing a button over here. You can also do the reset, for example, by pressing another key to reset it to other number and pressing it again to create the 50. Because I just use, for example, my finger to wrap the wire upon the metal part, the connection may not be stable. So usually you can use the soldering iron in order to create a more stable connection, in order to make it a more reliable switch. So this is essentially the part how we can create a physical switch which can have meaning and function in the virtual environment as produced by the gem window.